From 1991 to 2002, a civil war raged in the West African country of Sierra Leone. This war was prompted by the attempted overthrow of the country's government by a rebel group known as the Revolutionary United Front. This civil war left over 50,000 people dead and many displaced and scarred. In the first year of the war, the RUF took control of large portions of eastern and southern Sierra Leone, seizing control over lucrative diamond mining regions in the process. The RUF's ultimate goal was to oust Joseph Momo's government and take over the country for themselves. They didn't seem motivated by a particular ideology, as they did not proclaim themselves communist or fascist, nor did they advocate for a specific ethnic group. During peace negotiations in the year 1995, they published a pamphlet, Footprints to Democracy, toward a new Sierra Leone, which contained some social justice rhetoric and promoted Pan-Africanism. When the RUF began rising to power, civilians of Sierra Leone initially supported the group, seeing them as potential freedom fighters who promised to oust the corrupt elite, to equitably share the diamond revenues, and to give citizens free healthcare and education. These things, of course, never came, and instead the RUF brutalized citizens in particularly cruel fashion as they moved to take over Sierra Leone. Of the members of the RUF, one stands out for his cruelty and skill in ambushing unsuspecting targets: Sam Mosquito Boukari. Sam Boukari was born on October 2, 1964 in Koidou Town, Kono District in Sierra Leone's eastern province. His father was a diamond miner in Koidou Town, an occupation Sam would take on himself after he dropped out of secondary school. In 1985, he left the mines and began a career touring the countryside as a professional disco dancer, of all things. He eventually moved to Liberia and then to Abidjan, in the Ivory Coast, where he worked as a waiter, a barber, and an electrician. In 1989, Charles Taylor's National Patriotic Front of Liberia invaded Liberia from the Ivory Coast with the intention of ousting President Samuel Doe. Boukari eventually joined the NPFL later that year when he met recruits that mentioned the group's plans for Sierra Leone. He participated in guerrilla training exercises along the border of Sierra Leone and Liberia and became an official member of the newly formed RUF in 1990. Boukari participated in the initial excursion into Sierra Leone in 1991, and by 1992 he had moved up the ranks of the RUF, becoming its battle group commander, a position which meant he only answered to the battlefield commander or to Fode Sanko, the RUF's leader. By 1997, Sanko fled to Nigeria, where he was put on house arrest and later imprisoned. For 2 years before Sanko's release, Boukari functioned as the RUF's director of military operations, allegedly with advice from Charles Taylor. Sanko was a criminal and a monster in his own right, but Boukari's command of the RUF was grisly to say the least. In January 1999, he, along with Johnny Paul Koroma, the commander of the Armed Forces Revolutionary Council, planned and executed an attack on Freetown, the capital of Sierra Leone. The RUF captured the capital from government troops and a Nigerian-led peacekeeping force and brutally occupied the capital for 3 weeks. RUF rebels captured street after street, gunning down civilians and destroying homes. Young women were raped, abused, people were burned alive in their homes, and children and adults alike had their hands hacked off. I could give a more detailed account, but I'd not be able to fully convey the horrors the poor citizens were put through. So instead, I'll be leaving a link to a more detailed account in the description, and I'd suggest you read it if you'd like a fuller glimpse of the atrocities the RUF committed during this particular occupation. In 2000, Boukari fled Sierra Leone, moving to the Ivory Coast, where he participated in a rebellion led by Guillaume Soro, who had ties to Charles Taylor. At this point, world powers began pressuring Taylor to stand down and cease his evil deeds, and he complied, at least on the surface, by initiating a policy of disengagement for the RUF leaders and expelling Boukari from the country. Reportedly, Boukari moved freely between Liberia and the Ivory Coast. An unrelated civil war raged in the Ivory Coast at this time, and in order to secure peace in the region and increase trade with the Ivory Coast president, Laurent Gbagbo, Taylor allegedly ordered Boukari to assassinate a rebel leader in the region, Felix Doe, who was killed in 2003. By April 27, 2003, Boukari's exploits led him back to Liberia, where Charles Taylor was now president. Upon learning of his reemergence in the region, the UN pressured Taylor to apprehend Boukari and turn him over to the Special Court from Sierra Leone to indict him for crimes against humanity and war atrocities. Eventually, On May 5, 2003, Sam Bakari was killed in a gunfight with Liberian forces. There's some mystery and controversy surrounding Bakari's demise, as his testimony at the special court from Sierra Leone could have implicated Charles Taylor. It is suspected that Taylor sent troops to kill Bakari instead of just arresting him. This led to the proceedings of the SCSL being terminated on December 8, 2003. This whole period of time in Sierra Leone was marked by misery and bloodshed. The broader civil war and its participants would need to be covered in greater detail in other videos. To close this video, however, I can't think of much else to say about Sam Bakari than to call him a monster. His actions in command of the RUF saw men, women, and children mutilated and murdered, rendered homeless, raped, burned alive, and children made into soldiers. There could never be a good reason for doing such things, but it seems Bakari especially had no good reason to join the RUF or do any of the things that he did. It seems he simply acted in his own interest regardless of the devastation he created. There's not much more to be said about a man such as Bakari, besides that the world is certainly a better place without him.